For over a century now, Florida has been an incredibly popular destination for people to move to, both from within the US and from abroad. I myself have actually done both of those, and does that mean I might be biased? Sure, but I do think it's easy to see why people would want to move here. We have some of the best beaches in the US, no state income tax, the weather is nice, and it's one of the most culturally diverse states on the East Coast. That said, I feel like everybody else knows that living here can be expensive, especially in more urban areas. Maybe it would surprise you to hear that most Floridians making a move to a new town are actually opting to move within Florida, with the Orlando area being particularly popular. But for those actually moving out of the state, many are opting for other southeastern states like Georgia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. Today, we are going to talk about this last one, which I feel particularly qualified to do because North Carolina is my other home state, and we'll compare all the key factors between North Carolina and Florida that people consider when making a move. We'll cover community and climate, cost of living, and the state of the housing market, taxes, and that fun stuff, and more. If you are new here, my name is Elvira, and this is my real estate channel. I'm a local realtor based in beautiful Hollywood here in South Florida, and I make videos showcasing local buildings and neighborhoods, along with videos like this that get into things a little more abstract. If you'd like to learn what's available in my area, learn more about what it's like living in South Florida, or you are just generally curious about the state of the market, then consider hitting subscribe and leaving a like so the algorithm notices us. I thought this video would be fun because, like I said, I lived in North Carolina, the Charlotte area to be exact, for around 15 years. It's where my son really grew up because he spent most of his life there, and 15 years makes up a big chunk of my life as well. He still lives there up in the high country, and he helps me with these videos. So between the two of us, we really know what we are talking about with this one. Without further ado, let's just jump straight into it, starting with community and climate. Everybody knows what the weather is like in Florida, so I won't spend too long on that. But what some people may not realize is just how drastically your community can vary depending on where you are. Broadly speaking, if you want a normal-paced, suburban kind of lifestyle, but with easy access to high-quality entertainment and opportunities to get outside, then Central Florida is a good place to look. If you want a rural lifestyle that's more typical of the rest of the Southeast, then look around the Panhandle or even some of the more out there parts of South Florida. If you want the tropical vibe everyone expects, an international environment and an urban way of life, then come to the Miami area. The international aspect is particularly important to South Floridians, and I think it's a huge part of the reason we've seen so many people from New York come down here for a long time now. My point is, though, that there is a community niche for everyone. In terms of climate, if we start in the south, it's real deal tropical. Summer basically takes up 9 months of the year, and things are lush, humid, and sunny. If you are from somewhere like New York, I'd say you'd be pretty justified in saying that we basically have summer all year. It can get down into the 50s and 40s, but only very occasionally. And the average in winter is usually around 60-70 degrees. If you have a green thumb, South Florida is a great place to garden. And I've known people who grow fruit like mangoes, bananas, guava, or coconuts in their yard. If you draw a triangle between Key West, Jupiter, and Fort Myers, then you roughly have the part of Florida that's geographically in the tropics. You can also sort of see where this tropical part is just by looking at land development on Google Maps. Names that people recognize, like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Boca Raton, and West Palm Beach, are all situated in the tropical zone, and that's why it's one of the most developed and densely populated parts of the state. Naturally, it also means we have some of the best beach weather in the US. The rest of Florida is classified as subtropical, but I don't know if that says much because I think everyone understands that the whole state stays pretty warm and humid for most of the year. I personally really like hot weather, and so I think the only fatal drawback we have in terms of climate is hurricane season, but I'll come back to that in a second. Let's look north now. North Carolina may not be as culturally diverse as Florida, although that's been steadily changing over the last few decades. But whatever it lacks in that respect, it's made up for with geographical diversity and a balanced climate. The state is neatly divided into three geographical zones: the mountains, the Piedmont, and the coastal plain. The Piedmont is home to the largest population centers, and like most states, this is where the majority of life goes on and where we see most transplants moving to. Think metro area like Charlotte and Raleigh. Life tends to be pretty suburban and car depends, just like in Florida, but there is a nice mix of things to do in the region with plenty of concert venues, museums, and increasingly thriving food scene. The massive Carolina Zoo and seasonal and cultural festivals. The coastal plain is the most rural part of the state with a lot of land dedicated to agriculture, but seaside towns like Wilmington, Emerald Isle, and the communities on the Outer Banks are popular with tourists and vacationers looking to enjoy the beaches and some of the historical sites out there. The mountains are quite rural as well, though they are paradoxically the part of the state that's the most popular with tourists and vacationers, thanks to their natural beauty and mild climate during the summer months. The only place that most people would think of as a proper city in this part of the state is Asheville, which has grown significantly in the last decade, and the large majority of communities are small to medium-sized, with a lot of luxury development that's taking place in spots that are particularly popular or scenic. In terms of climate and weather, North Carolina is also considered subtropical, but the seasonal differences are much more pronounced than in Florida. Spring is brisk and tends to be rainy. Summer is lush and hot. Fall is chilly and picturesque. And winter is fairly gray and cold. In the 15 years that we lived in the Charlotte area, we would usually get snow at least once in a couple of years. Sure, it was never much, but a heater for the winter definitely isn't optional. The coast stays a little warmer thanks to warm air from the Gulf Stream, but the mountains get properly cold and you are more likely to see some snow over the winter. This finally leads me to the thread I left open from way earlier, that being hurricane season. Much like Florida, I'd say this is probably the only real major drawback in terms of climate for most people. North Carolina isn't really all that far away from here, and with a large coastline and the Gulf Stream passing by, hurricanes and tropical depressions aren't uncommon either and do present issues to residents. I'm sure you've seen footage of homes in the Outer Banks being swallowed up by ocean swells, but they can even affect parts of the state you won't necessarily expect, as Hurricane Helene proved last year. I'm not super up to date on the exact effect it had on property insurance rates in the state, but I do know they have gone up. That brings us to the next section of the video. How much does it cost to live there, and what's the housing market currently like? Starting with Florida, I think everybody understands that if you want to live in the more popular areas, then you kind of have to pay a premium to live there. I'm not talking about how we have a lot of exclusive communities, but more about the simple fact that our location makes life here more expensive for all of us, especially in urban coastal areas. Between the heat, humidity, wind, sea salt, and flooding, Florida was a builder's nightmare until fairly recently, and it's still not easy. Buildings degrade faster here than they do in more temperate parts of the country, and the fact that hurricanes hit us pretty frequently means that property insurance is a nightmare. We've consistently had some of the highest insurance rates in the country for years now, and I know people who are fairly well off but not crazy rich who are currently paying around 15 grand a year on their home. I mean, that's a brand new car every year, and I can already see one of you going to your keyboard to say, "But Florida doesn't require you to have property insurance." You're right, but you know who does? The bank you got your mortgage from. Granted, that's an example that's on the more extreme end, but it's really not a pretty situation. The cost of living in Florida also depends on what type of building you are looking to live in. The market in single-family homes has remained fairly stable, but the market in condos has undergone some serious corrections in the last couple of years thanks to a flurry of legal action after the Surfside collapse in 2021. If you want an in-depth look at how that went down and how it's still affecting the Florida condo market, I made a video about that earlier this year. Click up here to check it out. Then there's also just the fact that demand is still high and people want to move here, and that just by itself drives activity in the market and causes prices to rise. It's not all doom and gloom though. Florida has a lot of perks in place for permanent residents that balance out some of the factors that drive up cost of living. For example, no income tax means your money goes further than in a state with a higher cost of living like California or New York, which is particularly awesome if you draw your income through investments or a retirement fund. Permanent residents can also apply for homestead exemption status, which caps your annual property tax and protect you from extreme rises in property value. Put all of this together, and you have a highly competitive market that rewards people who do their research, know what they want, and who are willing to be a little aggressive in getting it. North Carolina, on the other hand, has a market that's more mellow. Prices have steadily risen over the years, but not as dramatically as in other areas of the country. I mean, let's just compare the average price per square foot. The average home in Florida costs right around 410 grand and has about 1,600 square feet. In North Carolina, the average price is around 325 grand and the square footage is closer to 1,800. Do some basic math and we can see that the average square foot in Florida costs about $256, whereas in North Carolina, that number is about $180. That means your money goes about 35% further per square foot in North Carolina than it does in Florida. Now, I'll admit that this isn't particularly rigorous math and averages aren't always reflects the real-life experience, so take that as my caveat. I'm a realtor, not an economist, and the real percentage differences is probably lower. That said, my point is that real estate is just objectively cheaper in North Carolina. Just like Florida, it can depend on where you are and what sort of home you live in, but when you consider that both states have similar median incomes, this pretty substantial difference in average prices helps you understand why North Carolina is popular with Floridians. Since it's a less competitive market overall, it's easier for people working on a more average income to find a fair deal on the home. Even for wealthier buyers, it's not uncommon to find Floridians who own an investment property in North Carolina. In a sort of reverse snowbird phenomenon, there is a sizable contingent of Floridians who own vacation properties in the mountains to escape the milder weather during the summer. Since the Florida homestead exemption only requires you to live in Florida for a majority of the year to be eligible, these buyers get the best of both worlds if they play their cards right. North Carolina does have state income tax, but there is a reasonable argument to be made that it makes up for this fact with lower property prices and a more straightforward market. Insurance costs and provider availability are also made more reasonable, at least inland. When you ask people why they moved to North Carolina, you'll hear the job market and affordability brought up a lot. So let's talk about that. Florida's economy has always been heavily tied to tourism, hospitality, and construction, but it's really diversified over the few decades. The Miami area has become a hub for international business, finance, and especially tech startups. Orlando has developed a notable research scene in medicine and biotech on top of all the entertainment jobs that everybody already knows it for. And let's not forget Tampa, which has increasingly leveraged its position as one of the Gulf's major port cities into being a hub for logistics, transportation, and technology. Overall, we've been adding jobs at a solid pace, and because of the sheer size of state, you can find opportunities across the really wide range of industries. The flip side, though, is that it comes with high competition. With so many people moving in every year, the job market here can feel crowded, especially in the bigger metro areas, where high-paying positions are in demand and life is already expensive. North Carolina has an expanding job market as well, though it cast a broader net than Florida and opted for a less aggressive approach. It also followed a similar trajectory where it's been steadily gaining attention from people across the country and internationally for around the last 3 decades. The triangle Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill is famous for its universities, but it's also developed into one of the biggest tech and research hubs in the Southeast. There is a large emphasis on biotech, software development, and healthcare jobs, often with higher than average salaries compared to the state's cost of living. But there is genuinely a lot of world-class research that goes in the state in just about any subject you can imagine. Charlotte is a major banking and finance center, second only to New York in terms of the number of big banks headquartered there, and it's being steadily drawing young professionals in droves. It also grown more international as the airport is now the 3rd largest connecting hub in the nation. Asheville and the mountain towns are big on the tourism and service industries, while the coast is involved in everything from agriculture to shipping, renewable energy, and tourism. So, in short, Florida is bigger and flashier when it comes to job opportunities, especially if you want to be in an industry with international reach. But North Carolina offers a steadier growth path with strong prospects in tech, healthcare, and finance, while also giving you more bang to your buck when it comes to what your salary can actually buy you. So, at the end of the day, both Florida and North Carolina remain excellent places to live. It really just depends on what kind of lifestyle and financial situation you are looking for. Florida tends to be big, bold, and fast-paced, especially down south, and comes with benefits like with no income tax and year-round sunshine. But all of that comes at a premium. North Carolina, on the other hand, gives you more breathing room financially, a more balanced climate, and a steadily growing job market, but it doesn't have quite the same tropical energy. If you're weighing your options or thinking about making a move to South Florida, I'd love to help you figure out what makes the most sense for you. You can find my contact information in the description below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.